With the upcoming release of one of the Wii U's most left-behind JRPGs, Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE, and with ports like Grandia 1 and 2 Collection or the Collection of Mana, we are starting to get to the point where people are feeling all the old RPGs they wanted to see on Switch are accounted for. But there's still a ton more, and what follows is a wish list of my most wanted JRPGs for the Switch, most of which will be chosen due to how inaccessible they are without a new port, and how likely they are, which means the vast majority of my choices will be already existing games on other Nintendo platforms. First up, Xenoblade Chronicles X, or Cross if you're one of those people. Since Tokyo Mirage Sessions is coming to the Switch, Xenoblade Chronicles X is one of the last JRPGs still stuck on the Wii U, one of Nintendo's worst performing consoles, which of course left this as one of the most underappreciated and underexperienced JRPGs of the generation. With Xenoblade Chronicles 2 already being on the Switch and Chronicles 1 coming shortly, this would effectively be the only Xenoblade game not represented on the console, and because its exclusion is so odd and outstanding, I feel it actually stands a huge chance of actually coming. But I don't think it'll be coming alone. Xenoblade Chronicles X would likely be a very easy port for Monolith Soft to pull off, but the game ended with a whole lot of unanswered questions for the player, which leads me to believe they are waiting until a sequel to the game is further in development. That way they can release this port just a little bit before Part 2 comes out. Next up, I got two games I want to see here from the same franchise. Fire Emblem has proven itself to be a huge success on the Nintendo Switch, and the team behind the series isn't new to the idea of ports or remakes. And so what I'd like to see is Radiant Dawn and Path of Radiance both ported to the Switch, maybe with some extra difficulty options for newcomers. Neither one of these games sold well at release despite the systems they were released on, and as such they command unreasonable prices in the aftermarket. Personally, the one I want to see the most is the GameCube title, Path of Radiance. Why? Because I don't own that one and it costs too much. Is that selfish? Probably. Though I haven't had the chance to play that one myself, I can't help but feel like it stands a chance of being the better game overall anyway. Next, with Dragon Quest XI Echoes of an Elusive Age Definitive Edition S dropping on the Switch, not only does that bring with it the longest title I'll have to say in a while, but also proof that there's a market for Dragon Quest games on Nintendo home consoles, something we haven't seen in decades. With this, I think we can bundle together some of the 3DS ports of older Dragon Quest games and release them in a collection. Dragon Quest 7 and 8 would fit in perfectly on the Nintendo Switch, and while we're at it, let's make a trilogy and include Dragon Quest 9 from the Nintendo DS. Of course, some up-resing and some texture upgrades will be required, but either way, a Dragon Quest collection for the Switch would be awesome. And if they want to throw in some other games, you know, maybe official translations of the Torneko games, I certainly won't complain. And while we're waiting for Shin Megami Tensei 5 to drop, I know you guys haven't forgot about that one. If somebody wants to go ahead and just port some of the other SMT games to Switch just to establish a market for them,
that would be great.
It's not like there's a shortage of SMT games to choose from. I, of course, would prefer a collection release because I'm just greedy that way. But even standalone releases, maybe at bargain prices, $30 a pop, maybe $40, I think it would do wonders to expand the audience and get the new game primed for release. And while we're at it, let's bring another series off the 3DS and onto the Switch. One that's very similar to the SMT games, but also very, very different. The Etrian Odyssey games. Long hailed by many as the best franchise in the genre, it has always struggled to find its fan base. I think the Switch would be an excellent opportunity for this series to get its footing. And going back to Monolith Soft for a bit, the Baten Kaitos games, or however you pronounce them. I've talked about them before in my video of JRPGs I want to see remade or remastered, but even just an HD port of the original two games on GameCube would be incredible. I never got the chance to play Baten Kaitos Origins before, but really loved the other entry back in the day, and I would love to have any new excuse to play them both again today. With RPGs being on a bit of a rise again, and with many of them like Persona 5 or Fire Emblem Three Houses beating all previous sale records for their respective franchises, Baten Kaitos would have a real chance to catch on today. The last story as well definitely needs a wider release here. Now, it did release on one of the most popular consoles ever made, the Nintendo Wii, but its release was fairly small and its advertising was nearly non-existent. Considering also that many JRPG fans were not exactly Wii owners or Wii JRPG devotees in any way, it really flew under the radar. This stands as one of Final Fantasy creators Hironobu Sakaguchi's best creations since leaving Final Fantasy. The story takes a bit to get going, but once it does, it's quite the whirlwind adventure, with a really unique battle system that I think more people need to check out. Plus, Mistwalker Studios can really use a leg up right now. Something big that can allow them to make big console JRPGs again with international releases. I mean, these are the guys responsible for Lost Odyssey. There is a lot of talent and potential here that's just not getting utilized right now. My next game here isn't really a true-to-form JRPG, not by a long shot, but I really want to see a new port of Fantasy Life. This is more like a life simulation Animal Crossing kind of game, but RPG mechanics are pretty darn important to the gameplay, so I'm going to include it here anyway. This is a whimsical little game with a catchy OST and a really outstanding sense of humor. There's multiple classes to play as and train in, and they all radically affect what you can do in the game. It is way too easy to put hundreds of hours into Fantasy Life, but sadly, at its release, it garnered very little attention. Maybe it's the childlike level 5 graphics style, or maybe it's just too hardcore for Animal Crossing fans, even though it's not a hardcore game at all, and too softcore for most RPG fans. Either way, this is one of those games, like Animal Crossing, you can just turn on and kind of vibe to. I feel more compelled in this game than its contemporaries to go out, explore the world, accomplish things, and pursue a storyline while building out my skills and life at home. If you're a fan of Stardew Valley, Animal Crossing, Popolo Croix, or Harvest Moon, I would highly recommend you check out Fantasy Life. Also, let's bring Popolo Croix to the Switch while we're at it. And who could forget Smart Boys Toys Club? Oops, that's not supposed to be in there. Word on the street is that Tales of Symphonia is getting yet another release, this time on Switch, and I definitely have nothing against this. Nostalgia makes this one of my favorite Tales of games still, but from here I think we can source some other Tales games. Sticking only to Tales games released on Nintendo consoles really limits what I can draw on, but there's one Tales of game here that many hail as the best of them all, at least from a narrative and character standpoint. This is a game that still hasn't caught on as much as other Tales of games, and hasn't been given nearly as many chances. I'm talking about Tales of the Abyss. Yes, that's right, like many games on this list so far, this started on the PlayStation 2, but the DS and 3DS have a huge pool of PS2 ports, and among them, Tales of the Abyss can be found. Abyss plays a lot like Symphonia, but with just a few more tweaks to the battle system, which makes it feel much more accessible for modern players. But it still retains enough relics of the past, like the overworld and the UI, for old school players to be interested. Now, part of me wants to throw some SNES games in here, like Chrono Trigger or Earthbound or Evo, but at this point I'm feeling like some of that would just be a wasted slot. Given how Nintendo now offers SNES games with their subscription service, I feel like at least Earthbound is an incredibly likely up-and-comer. I also don't want to be relying so much on the Wii, GameCube, and DS libraries, but man, the N64 just didn't have many RPGs. I guess there's Quest 64 and Tactics Ogre, but I don't particularly have much love for those, so I guess Paper Mario should be a slot by default. Looking at the Game Boy Advance though, we have a few contenders, and the biggest and most obvious one is of course Golden Sun. This is one that, if released on the Switch, should definitely be a collection. At the very least, Golden Sun 1 and 2 would have to be. They are in essence one complete game. Though just for good measure, Golden Sun 3 should be included as well. Psst, I've never actually played Golden Sun 3. Golden Sun 1 and 2 aren't just good RPGs for the Game Boy Advance, but good RPGs in general, offering a fun and imaginative world, a Pokemon-like collecting aspect by the way of the Djinn, a fun leveling and magic system that rewards patient and strategic attack planning, some pretty tense and atmospheric moments, killer music, compliments of Motoi Sakuraba, and some really cool overworld skills to make exploration much more fun and engaging. There's lots to explore in these games, and a lot to find and challenge yourself with, especially in Golden Sun 2, with some bosses completely capable of giving you nightmares in their difficulty. Before closing out the video now, I want to stop boxing myself in and include just 2 more wishes I want without regards to them being previously released on Nintendo consoles. Without restrictions, there's hundreds of games that I could put here, but there's 2 releases in particular I want more than anything. First, like the Grandia 1 and 2 collection, I want a Tsui Codon 1 and 2 collection, but I would settle for even just Tsui Codon 2. Konami, as garbage as they are these days, has shown no shortage of interest in doing things with some of their old IPs. Emphasis, of course, on some. Sometimes they do bad things, and sometimes they do good things. It seems like making the leap to Switch would be easy, and my god, I just really want a physical copy of Tsui Codon 2 in some capacity. The original release has eluded my grasp for far longer than I would like at this point, and every year that goes by without it is another year where I just don't feel that complete. But I will say that if they screw over the sprite work at all and try to alter this game's aesthetic, it's gonna be an instant deal breaker. I want this game in its full original glory. And my biggest dream for the Switch, bar none, is the story so far. No, not that one. Maybe I should say the legend so far. I want a collection release of the Trails in the Sky series and the Crossbell duology, provided an official translation of the Crossbell arc can happen. I want all of the important games leading up to Cold Steel released on one cartridge. Mind you, I would take this on any platform. This is something I can never see happening though. It's simply too much work to translate the Crossbell games just to include them in a Legend So Far bundle this way. And the only chance it would ever have on Switch is if Cold Steel and further entries would be making an appearance on the system as well. Yeah, it's definitely a dream and nothing more. And that's all I'm gonna say on this topic, guys. There's a lot that we can bring forward despite all the great games we've already got ported. Great games like Grandia, the Mana games, The World Ends With You, Tales of Vesperia, and many, many more. There's still a lot that we could bring forward. And before anybody goes to commenting like, why no Persona 4 or 5 in that last section or anything like that, well, it's not that I don't want them, it's just, that's the same sort of thing you'll hear in any sort of video of this topic. And the last thing I want to do is just make the same video you're gonna get anywhere else. A lot of these choices may seem like people's second choices, or they may seem generic to some. To longtime subscribers, many of these are just going to be overly expected. But I try to avoid the most obvious answers in videos like this, just to shed light on other things that I think would be more interesting to hear about. Things that you maybe don't hear about every day, or aren't going to hear about for the 100th time. In that, I hope this video was interesting enough and highlighted some holes in the Switch's library that would be awesome to see filled. Here on Tarks Gauntlet, I'm all about filling some holes. So if you liked the video and found it interesting at all, you guys all know the deal. Like, comment, subscribe, and share the video if you can. Links to all my socials are in the description below. And as always, folks, thanks for watching. What? Face.